We're gonna take and make an informational video today that shows you some of the features of our twin divers hot water system. This in no way takes the place of having properly been trained on how to operate and use a hot water system. First, we'll go over some of the electric control that we use. What you basically have is two single units that can be operated together. Okay, here's your unit 1 on the left and your unit 2 on the right. You have your primary and your secondary digital readouts. You have your alarms that are lighted, your burner isolation switch, electric valve bypass switch, and a bypass switch. Right below that, we have a twin fuel filter system. You can select either fuel supply number 1 or fuel supply number 2. You can service these filters on the fly by simply changing the selector valve down here. You can clean one filter out while the system is still operating using the other filter in case you get some bad diesel fuel. Down here we have your discharge manifold. The discharge manifold is laid out in a configuration that you can operate one unit or 2 units or both units independently, and if need be you can turn this and you have a crossover valve and use the BTU output of both units to feed 1, 2, or 3 divers. As we move off to the left, you have your manifold pressure valve. That's used to balance out the flow between the two coils so you get nice even heat. Down here we have a fuel system emergency crossover valve. This valve is placed here for emergency purposes only in an instance that you have a bad fuel pump, you plug the fuel pump internally, and the unit still has to keep running. You'll simply turn this valve. What that allows is the fuel pump from the system that's still working to run the system that's not working. There's a check valve installed here at the regulator so that this can be serviced on the fly. That being said, let's start the system up. You'll want to hook your water supply in here. That goes through your water supply regulator. Plug your unit in, hook up the fuel supply, hook up your dive hoses, your discharge hoses. First thing you want to do then is make sure that your breakers are in the on position, up. Your burner isolation switch is in the off position, down. Your top mushroom switch will turn unit 1 on. The bottom mushroom switch will turn unit 2 on. You can see it takes a second for the digital readouts to boot up. You hear the contactors and the relays kick in, and the water should start flowing through your machine. At that time, once you have your 4 output lights, you can turn your alarms on. You'll notice that it's lit to let you know that the alarm is not turned on. You have a white light, a green light when it's on, and you'll have a trip light, and the light on the digital readout that tripped in that instance will go out. All right. We have water flowing through the machine. Fuel supply is hooked up. We've selected fuel supply number 1 in this case. Your manifold valves are wide open. So we're going to fire up unit 1. Should be a 6-second delay and your unit will fire. You heard the unit 1 come on right now. You'll start to see the temperatures rise on your digital readouts. We're going to go ahead and fire up unit 2. Your 6-second delay, and you heard the unit fire. Next thing you want to do is check your fuel pressure. In this case, we got the fuel pressure set at the lowest possible setting, 100 psi on each regulator. Now it takes a few minutes for the temperature to build up inside of the system. At this time, you can make sure that your water pressure to each manifold has been balanced and that your fuel pressure to each burner is equal also. On this manifold down here, you have your diver output valves, and then these are bypass valves. Especially if you have more than one diver hooked up to the system at a time, you want to let this bypass run just a little bit. Then when the divers are moving around, the system will kind of balance itself and you won't get spikes in your water temperature. The water temperature on this thing, once it levels out, should be plus or minus 1 degree all day long. The units are not supposed to be cycling. If they're cycling, the unit's not set up correctly. We're always around. You can call us anytime and we'll go over setting up the system with you. On your digital readout display, it says system on the top and target on the bottom of each of the 4 displays. Right now the system water temperature is 133 degrees. You'll see sometimes when the system is warming up, they won't all read identical. Once it's leveled out, they should be within a degree of each other. And then below that you have your target, okay? If you read here, underneath each digital readout, your primary high limit should be set 3 degrees above. Your target temperature should be set 3 degrees above your working temperature. So in this case, let's say we have a 140 degree working temperature. This set point should be set at 143. The secondary high limit should be set 5 degrees above your working temperature. So if this is 140, if it's 140, it should be set at 145. All right. If your secondary trips, the water will stop running to the diver through the system. If the primary trips, the water will continue to flow to the diver and the system will turn itself back on again. We're going to show you what happens, actions and reactions of the secondary and primary high limits once the unit's been up to temperature. So you can see right now we're running 143 degrees on all of our digital readouts. So for instance, I'm going to just trip out your primary here. All right? To change your set point or your target, you hit the set point button once, twice, and it'll tell you your set point's at 145. I'm going to turn that down to 143. I'm going to hit the set point button again, the up key, and send it back to the main menu. You'll see what happens when the primary tripped, the alarms come on, and the alarms can be silenced while you remedy the problem. I'm just going to turn that set point back up. You're going to have to wait for your output light to come on. You'll hear the burner start to turn, and then you can turn your alarms back on. You can see that the temperature inside of that system dropped down to about 125 degrees, while the secondary system was running at 144. If for some reason that unit would have went south, broke down, say transformer burned out, a motor burned out or something like that, you can use this crossover valve and send the hot water from the other unit to both divers, to both stations. Turn this fuel pressure, or the water pressure, it's all the way up. Now, there's a few ways to adjust the temperature inside of the system. One is with your manifold valve here. You can open and close to decrease or increase the manifold pressure on this system, or using the valve on unit 1, you can use it to adjust the pressure on that. Secondary just tripped out when I cut that water flow down. All right, a primary trip, the water should still be flowing through the system. It should cool itself off, and you'll hear the unit come back on again. There's different ways to get back to adjusting the temperature of the water to the diver. You have the flow into the machine through your regulator up here. Okay? That splits an equal amount of pressure to both units. You have your water into the machine here for each individual coil. You have your water output here using your diver valve or your bypass valve to trim the flow to your diver. If you can't get enough temperature, you have this all adjusted. You can take your fuel pressure, you can increase that fuel pressure about 5 psi at a time. Round figures will give you 1 degree of rise on the output temperature. That being said, there's a Reader's Digest version of how to operate our twin system. I just want to go through the water system, the fuel system, and the electrical system so you kind of get a better feel for how this whole thing operates. So your water comes in here, flows up past the check valve into your regulator. This regulates the pressure to your manifold gauges. The water comes down this hose, goes past this electric valve. This electric valve gets turned on and off by your secondary controller. If your secondary controller is tripping, that means your machine's not set up correctly and you cannot get water flow to the diver. Then your water comes up to your manifold pressure valve. You can use this valve to increase or decrease flow through the system. Next comes your flow switch. If there's not an adequate flow of water through the system, the burner will not fire. Now you go back down into your coils. That's where all the work gets done. You run through your coils. In the back here, your heated water comes out, goes into another hose, comes around to your discharge manifold. As it comes into the discharge manifold, there's a temperature and pressure valve located in the rear for your safety. There's a check valve located right here. You have your bypass valve, 2 diver valves. Now, can be isolated to unit 1. You have 2 diver valves and a bypass valve that can be isolated to unit 2. If you need the BTU output of both units for your task, for your divers, you just turn this valve and all that water will flow into however many outlets you need from both systems at the same time. That's pretty much the water side of the system. Now we're going to go to the electrical controls. This is a 220 50 cycle system. All right. Your mushroom switches to turn the unit on and off are located in the side. Your push to stop, they're located in the outside of the box. So if you have your lid down and closed, you can still get to the switches in case of an emergency. On your control panel, the electricity will come in, it goes to your breaker switches. Once that breaker switch allows power to go to the rest of the system, it turns on your 24-volt transformer and brings power up to your contactors and your relays that are controlled by these digital outputs. There's 2 separate electrical systems inside of here, one for your unit 1 and one for unit 2. Unit 1, if that trips out, only shuts your burner off. If unit 2 trips out, shuts your burner and your water off. All right, now we're going to briefly go over the fuel system again. You have 2 fuel inlets down here in the bottom. It's on a pivoting bracket, so no matter what angle your fuel supply is coming in at, you can just swivel this bracket around, and there's a snap fitting that's applied with the system for each of 1 or 2 fuel supplies. Your fuel comes up, goes into your fuel canisters, and you'll be using one canister or the other depending on how you use this fuel selector valve. Fuel selector valve is put in here for the purpose of, if you have bad fuel, you can swap your fuel supply to a clean filter, and this can be serviced while the units are running. The fuel will come out of here and flow into what we have back here called the tiger loop. This tiger loop deaerates your fuel. There's air in it. It'll also help heat your fuel before it goes into the combustion chamber for a better burn. We come out of your tiger loop, comes down these 2 hoses here, and goes into your fuel pump. The hoses are marked with arrows for your inlet and return line. There's JIC fittings located at the bottom of the fuel pump for quick service. The fuel pump will make the pressure, comes up here to your regulator. Your regulator can be adjusted by turning your blue knob clockwise or counterclockwise. Never operate that below 100 psi. Fuel comes out of the regulator, through the check valve, goes into your fuel valve. This is a delayed fuel valve. There's a time delay inside the circuit that allows all the hot gases to be purged from the combustion chamber before the unit's allowed to refire. Once that valve opens, the fuel goes into the burner nozzle tube, and the combustion happens inside here. That's it. A feature that we have unique to custom design fabrication designs is the fuel system emergency crossover valve. You would only use this valve in the case that you had a fuel pump down here on the side of the burner that went bad, and you still need to operate both coils to get enough BTU output for your divers. If one fuel pump goes bad, you simply turn this valve and it will use the fuel from the other system and feed both systems for you at the same time. There's a check valve incorporated in the regulator that will allow you to change this fuel pump on the fly. Change it, make your repairs, then you would close your valve and the system will run like normal. If your primary digital readout shuts off, that'll just shut your burner off alone. If your secondary trips, that shuts the water off to the diver also. Now, on here we have alarm switches. You can see there's a green indicator light that your alarm's been turned off. It's easier to see here. And there's a white indicator light that indicates your alarm has not been turned on. The red indicator light will come on here And one of these lights will go out depending on which unit has tripped. In the case of your unit's been tripping on and off. That pretty much does your electrical systems for